You're listening to the REI Marketing Nerds podcast, the leading resource for real estate investors who want to dominate their market online. Dan Barrett is the founder of AdWords Nerds, a high-tech digital agency focusing exclusively on helping real estate investors like you get more leads and deals online, outsmart your competition, and live a freer, more awesome life. And now, your host, Dan Barrett.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the REI Marketing Nerds podcast. As always, this is Daniel Barrett here from AdWordsNerds.com. And look, if you need more help, more online leads, more motivated sellers, you know where to go. You go to AdWordsNerds.com/strategy. That is AdWordsNerds.com/strategy, and we will help you out. Now, in this week's episode, I am talking to David Bokman. You may remember Dave. He was on the podcast, I want to say a couple years ago now, really incredible investor out of Philadelphia, but he recently made the decision to not only move to Florida, but also to merge his business with another investor's. I'm going to sit down with him and talk about what's been going on in his life over the last couple of years, how his marketing has changed, and so on. And before we jump into that, I want to introduce you to two very special guests I have here right now with me in the studio. Oliver Barrett. Oliver, say hello.
Hi.
And Maxwell Barrett. Go ahead and say hello.
Hi.
These are, you can tell, my children, and I am training them to be the next generation, the absolute best in the world in online advertising and marketing for real estate investors.
That is not true.
All right. Well, I guess that's not true. But anyway, let's get on with my interview with David Bokman. All right. This is Daniel Barrett, and I'm here with David Bokman. David, welcome to the show, man.
What's going on, man? Happy to be here. Thank you again for having me.
Yeah, no problem. We were just chatting before I press record and everything. We were kind of talking about like where you're at. You've actually been on the show before, and I am very curious about kind of catching up with you, talking a little bit about what's been happening in your real estate investing business. You made some big business decisions, some big life decisions that I'm really interested to dig into.
Yeah.
Before we do that, oh, and I should say, by the way, your website for people that want to go check it out is PhillyHomeInvestor.com, which is Philly, like Philly, Philadelphia there, which is, was your kind of base of operations for a really long time. But you recently moved down to Florida, and we were just kind of talking about this. And I personally, I am fascinated by decision-making processes, right? And obviously the decision to move, not just to move, but to move away from the market your investing business has been in. And you are super successful investor in Philly, been doing business in Philly for a long time now, right? I'm sure you're that market backwards and forwards. You've got all your resources there, but you made the decision to move down to Florida and sort of put that distance between you and the business. So I've got two questions. One is how did you go about making that decision? And then two, has it really impacted the day-to-day running of the business? Is it all that different with you in Florida and the business in Philly, or is it basically no change?
Yeah. That's a great question. And first, is this also a video format as well? People are watching this?
Yeah. We're people watching the video right now.
Cool,
not live, but we'll edit it. Yeah.
No, just want to set the tone for everybody. I am in my closet. We are converting this. We are converting this into an office, but I am in my closet. So
all right, you can't tell. It's a sick closet. You cannot tell.
I just wanted to get that out there. And with having two puppies and a daughter, it's also the quietest room. So I thank you. So yeah, I did move for my market, and so if I can back it up a little bit, I think, starting this type of business, and I think the reason why a lot of people get into it is so that they can create a business that doesn't really necessarily require them to be there physically.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I would say it's pretty accurate, right? People want to create a business where, they can travel and be all over the place. And so you have to trust in that process, right? So when COVID kind of hit, I think that escalated a lot of things. One, I shut down my physical location and we all went virtual already, and I already in my head I always toyed with the idea of doing virtual wholesaling. Right. But I just never really focused on it. So, it was kind of just the perfect storm. The physical office location closed down. We were already kind of doing things virtual, right? People were used to it at this point, right? Nobody needs to go to the title company. Everything can be sent to them electronically. It's almost like a touchless transaction, right? So the timing of it was, what can you say? I guess it was the time, right? And I think a lot of people will always stay in the comfort zone because it's easy and it's what they're used to. And of course, it was really hard for me to leave because that's where my family is from. I have a really small family. I'm really close to my parents. They're both alive, knock on wood. So it was a very difficult decision, but it was the best decision for myself and my family.
Sorry, I just hit my mute button by accident. Yeah, I think you mentioned your dog. My dog just got here and is
sniffing all around.
Yeah, jumping on the windows and doing all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that you mentioned, which is so interesting to me, because so AdWords Nerds has always been remote. My whole team's been remote, although we all happen to live close to each other, but just like by accident, right? So it's like we've always kind of been. But with the pandemic, you had this like rapid transition of basically everybody else in the universe to just kind of what you said, kind of like a touchless sort of economy where, it's like we went out to breakfast today and, because we're like we're all vaccinated and stuff. So we're back to going to restaurants and stuff. And we, just scan a QR code to get the menu. And then we ordered and paid on our phones. And then the food just came out to us and then we left. That was it, right? It's like the amount of like, I got to hand you a piece of paper and then I got to write it down on a piece of paper. And then you got to give me the piece of paper and then I got to take it back there and then I'll bring it back. And then you're going to, it's like all that stuff's kind of gone.
Yeah.
And so for you, it seems like it was a pretty painless transition. But if you look out at, the investors that you network with, do you feel like as an industry, we're transitioning well to that kind of process? Because it does seem like the whole virtual wholesaling thing was kind of ahead of the curve in that way. And shout outs to Chris Chico, I know, who like always says like he's the one who coined that term, right? Like, do you think we're adapting to that well, or are investors kind of falling behind in place or having difficulty with a certain kind of, piece of the transaction? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think the ones that are doing well and the ones that are succeeding during this time have adopted that mentality. And to be quite honest with you, they're closing deals over the phone.
Yeah.
Right. That's not something that I'm actively doing. I have a sales guy, he makes rapport, then he goes out there and he sees the property. I mean, that's almost reverse of what most people are doing.
Yeah.
Right. So if people are already doing that, they're closing the deals up over the phone, they're selling them over the phone or email. Mm-hmm. The title's all done. So I think we're absolutely transitioning. And it's funny you asked that question, and I mentioned to you earlier that I'm shifting my business a little bit and merging with another well-known wholesaler in my marketplace, and that's what he does. He has a team. They're all VAs, and the team is just doing SMS. They're just doing cold calling, and they're just doing sales, and they're just doing it all over the phone, residential and commercial.
Yeah.
So I think. And that's a shift in just mindset, like you go from like making offers in person because you think that's the best way to doing it over the phone. It's a huge shift in mindset, but I think the people that are doing it are the ones that are actually doing well right now.
Yeah. And I also think there's a bit of a chicken and the egg thing, right? Because the market has to be there, right? Like the seller has to be comfortable with the idea of a lot of this transactions happening kind of sight unseen, or, as I remember when people were like, well, no one's ever going to buy anything online because they don't feel comfortable putting their credit card information into a form. Right. And it's like, well, we all got over that. We all got over that pretty quick.
Real quick.
We all moved on pretty quick. So I am curious because it sounds like you're, and I'm definitely going to come back to the merging question. I'm fascinated by that, right? Because I just have so many questions about that. But to sort of stay on this point that you're talking about closing over the phone, right? It sounds like your kind of personal approach, kind of what I think most people would deem maybe like the traditional sales approach, right? Certainly for real estate investing, but really for any industry where it's like, hey, there's a value to the face-to-face. Just like you said, you build rapport. Hey, what's the weather like? Oh, it's rainy. Oh, it's rainy where I'm from. And then you connect with them or whatever it is. And you sort of build this relationship over time. And then you sort of transition to the sale or whatever. Now, how do you do that entirely over the phone. And I think the catch is for me as someone looking in and kind of scratching my head about that, it seems like in a really short period of time, right? Like Lou, who works sales for AdWords Nerds, my company, right? He'll talk to people for like a year and a half before we all feel comfortable with each other. Like he's great at that, right? That's what he does, right? He's a relationship person. That's why he's good at his job. But like, how do you do that when someone's like calling up and they're like a little defensive and they don't know you? And I mean, what is that process different, or is it not really that different at all? And I'm kind of blowing it out of proportion.
Yeah, I think that, I don't think it's all that different, but like I kind of alluded to, it's a complete 180 mindset shift, so like, and I'm still learning that process myself.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm merging with another guy because that's his strong suit. And he went through that process himself, just like me. He was the same exact way.
Yeah.
And then when his mentor, I'm sure we all know Mark DM Evans, told him that you need to shift your mindset. And he fought that tooth and nail until he actually decided to implement it and try it out.
Yeah.
And so I think once again, getting out of your comfort zone, and so how do you do it? I mean, obviously you're not making an offer to everyone over the phone, right? There's a process they need to get through, but I think it's definitely a mindset shift more than anything else than in just believing that process will work, that people will actually sell you their home over the phone if you sound educated, if you know about the property and the comps in the area, if you can back it up with, we have 100 Google 5-star reviews. And, if you have all this stuff that you can talk about over the phone is really no different than in person. And obviously we paint the picture that we're making you this offer based on exactly what you're telling us.
Right.
We are going to inspect the property at some point. So if there's no floors in the property and you said there was immaculate floors, then, we might discuss some things, but we're just setting the right expectations. Right. And I think if you do that properly, you can do it over the phone or in person. I mean, just think about all the sales jobs that are over the phone.
Yeah.
I started sales as an inside sales rep.
Yeah.
I bought and sold all kinds of things over the phone. So I think once again, it's just a mindset, blockage.
Yeah. It's just that there's like a mental barrier in this case specifically, right? For me, where I'm like, well, a house is different than buying or selling a couch or whatever. Right. But it isn't, right. Not in reality. Right.
Think about this. People are actually, people have a business off a bandit sign. I don't know about a business, but they're closing deals off of bandit signs. That's a strategy. That's a strategy I never used because I just didn't want that to represent my business.
Right.
I did more of the SEO and the brand building and PPC, which is why I worked with you guys. And that takes longer. But, I never wanted that to be the image of my company is just some like sign on the street,
Yeah.
But I'm probably missing out on deals, right? Because that's what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, it's like the fact that I mean, bandit signs is like the perfect example. And I bring it up a fair amount where it's like, it's a thing that seems like it shouldn't work, but clearly does because it has survived as a marketing methodology for many, many years. And now it's like, I'll drive around and I see bandit signs for not real estate investing. Like I'll see bandit signs with like, oh, we buy diabetic test strips.
Yeah.
Like that's a business. I don't understand what that means. Or like who, I don't understand how much, but it's a thing. It's a thing, right?
I think half the population is on diabetes. So, I mean,
I do like the idea of I'm on diabetes right now. I had to go on diabetes.
You know what I mean?
But that's a thing where it's this huge universe of people and thousands of people are going to pass the sign. And if 1% of those people, you know what I mean, like want to call the sign, then that's a flow of leads, right? I mean, you can't argue with success, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of success, see, you like that transition? Look at that. That's a killer segue. Speaking of success, I am super curious about this decision that you made. It sounds like relatively recently. It's still in the works, right? So we're not going to talk about specifics of the business deal, this idea to merge with your business with another investors, right? But I am so curious about one, like, why did you make that decision versus, let's say, trying to build up your capacity in-house? I think, which is kind of what most people would sort of think to do. And two, how did you choose the person? Because obviously business is such a weirdly intimate thing. You got to spend all this time with people. You really see people in like who they really are in terms of how they act in the course of their business, right? So how'd you make that decision, like personally? I'm so curious.
Yeah, so just a lot of, just for people listening, I'm going into my 6th year, right? So over course of the last few years, I think once again, COVID will probably be a topic because that sped up a lot of things, right? Not just in our world, but in a lot of things, and in the world in general. So, I think for me, and I think a lot of people will probably relate to this, I ended up hiring a while ago somebody who was a friend of mine. And I think a lot of people do that, right? They hire friends, and it's pretty consistent in the industry. And, I kind of had high hopes for him as like kind of taking over some parts of the business that would allow me to focus on other things. And so the goal was for him to be like a number 2, which would allow me to build the business. And that never really happened, but things were going good, right? So when things are good, right? So he was just doing what he was doing, which was acquisitions, dispositions, right. And we were just trucking along, but I was never really able to build the business. And so when COVID hit, everything changed. He ended up moving on, which was great because I kind of needed that change.
Right.
And really the last 2 years has given me a lot to think about. I did not make this decision easily. And I think over the last 2 years also, people have gone away, right? People have changed. People have merged together. People have changed the way they do business. I don't think that it's been like great for anybody. Yeah. At least not anybody that I really know, for the exception of, some of the larger teams. But, those large teams, they have high overhead. Yeah. So how much profit are they really bringing in? I don't know. Yeah. But for me, it changed my business, and to be quite honest, doing it alone is really just not that fun. And I still had that vision of, working with somebody. It just so happens this other person was at the same point in their life also, and so we've been talking since last year, and it's just all about timing, so that's kind of how I've been making the decision. I want to be able to grow the business so that right now I'm working in the business, which means I have a job. Yeah. Right. And I don't think a lot of people understand that if you're grinding away, which I'm not grinding away, but if you're working on things constantly, then, you still have a job. You're not running a business. And so for me, 2 people sharing resources and connections and people who complement one another, I think we'll be able to do bigger and better things together than alone. Yeah. That's kind of how it happened.
Want to find motivated seller leads online, but don't know where to start? Download our free Motivated Seller Keyword Report today. AdWords nerds have spent over $5 million this year researching the most profitable keywords for finding motivated seller leads. And you can grab these exact keywords when you download our report at www.adwordsnerds.com/keywords.
You are certainly right that there's a multiplicative effect, right? Like it's not 1 + 1 is 2. It's like 1 + 1 = 4 somehow. You know what I mean? When you get the right people in the room together, it's, you were telling your story about, hiring the friend. And it's like we sort of at AdWords Nerds, we recently sort of lost a team member, and I had not changed my core team in maybe like 7 years. You know what I mean? Like I was joking like, no, it's like you can join, but you can never leave. That's like how and I was like, you basically have to like kill someone for me to let go. It's just like, but, it's this kind of painful experience. And, it was difficult for me emotionally, right? Because I sort of view myself as this like team leader that is really compassionate and empathetic, and I can coach anyone through anything and yada, yada, yada. right? But you just we realized after the fact that's like, oh, somehow the dynamic had kind of gotten off course, and it's like it feels like there's more energy in the room than we'd had in years, right? For whatever reason. And maybe it's just the destabilization, maybe it's a bunch of different things. But it's so easy to, especially when you working with someone you really care about, which was the same case for me as was the case with you. It's so easy to overlook that or to kind of lose sight of it and not realize like what you could be doing, you know what I mean? Or what it could feel like. So I really respect your like dedication to that vision. You're like, no, like, just like you said, it's not that fun to do it by myself. And there's other ways to do that.
Yeah. And then just to finish, how I picked this specific person. It's funny. It's not even like we've done deals over the last 6 years. It is somebody that I've spoken with, and I think I've been doing sales my entire life. Corporate world. My parents came to this country. I really think to be good at sales and marketing and negotiations. You have to be able to read people. Mm-hmm. The way they talk, the way they walk, the way they hold themselves. And this particular person, we grew up in the same neighborhood. We're almost from like the same cut of cloth. So like, I trust him. I think when you've been in the business long enough, that the people that are actually doing deals it's a pretty small circle. What do they say? The 2% of the people are doing like 80 or 90% of the deal. I don't know what I mean.
Smaller than people say it is too, because there are people be like, yeah, I did 5 deals this week. You're like, great. Yeah. Where were they? They were in Flavortown.
Yeah.
Flavortown? Yeah. Flavortown. Gotcha. Yeah, for sure.
So in this industry, I think like one of the most important things is just like trust and like character. And I think his is up there. And to me, that's like the most important thing, right? So, and obviously we fill in the gaps for one another, so he's got a team already in place. He's not really into certain things that I'm into. So how can I take his systems and processes and make it better?
Best.
And once again, allowing us to have a team that's functioning while we work on bigger deals like the commercial deals and the storage facility. So it's coming together slowly, but I feel good about it. So once again, it's about timing. I didn't rush to this decision, and like I said, we've been talking since last year.
Well, I'm super excited for you because I that sense of he likes to do the stuff I don't like to do. I like to do the stuff that they don't like to do. That's like the best. That's just the best. That is the best. So I'm super curious. I mean, you've mentioned kind of COVID a couple times, right? Because that's, the sort of big, seems wild because as we're recording this, like world political events feel like they've already moved on. And now we're talking about other terrible stuff that's happening. But, at least for the last couple of years, COVID was like the primary terrible thing that was happening. And so I'm curious, just when you back out and you look at the last couple of years, 2020 to 2022, as we're recording this, right? What do you view as the story of that time period in terms of the effects that it had on real estate investing, on your business specifically? Like when you back up and you say like, okay, here's what that meant to me in terms of this is how it impacted the way I'm doing business. And then maybe more importantly, how is that informing what you see the next couple of years looking like? Because I will say, just as a bit of context, right? We know a lot of the same people, kind of networking groups and stuff. Obviously I work with a lot of investors, a lot of investors. My impression of, when I try to take like the temperature of the room, so to speak, is that people are kind of nervous because there's a sense that like we sort of got through this big thing and maybe it wasn't as bad as everyone maybe thought it was in terms of its impact on real estate investing. But now we have inflation and now we have, like Ukraine, and now we have this and now we have that. And like, no one really knows like what is the next thing. Yeah. So I'm curious, like, what's your take on that when you back out and you look at narrative? What were the last couple of years all about, like in your mind, and kind of what do you see as your next couple of years to being about?
Yes, so there was a lot there in that question. I would say everybody should be nervous, and anyone that says they know what's going on has no idea what's going on. Like they just don't, and just for some context, like I'm in the stock market as well. When COVID hit, I needed something to do, and my friend kind of sucked me in, and so I day traded and I'm involved.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So I see the headlines that come in, I see how it's affecting the market. So and even the traders don't know. We're in a time where nobody knows. And you just have to be honest and say, I don't know. And I haven't spoken to a single investor in the last 2 years that claims to know anything. So what COVID did to me, though, and I can only speak for myself.
Sure.
But if it did it for me, I'm sure it did it for a lot of people, was that it exposed them. And what I mean by that is, if you were spending too much on marketing, if you were letting things fall through the cracks, whatever it was, whatever inefficiencies you had, it exposed you. And maybe not right away, but it was like a slow kind of like spiral down, okay, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, okay, real estate's shut down for a little bit. Okay, 2 months in, and now, 2 years later, right? So, what did it do for me? I mean, in the beginning, everyone was like, okay, let's increase marketing to take care of, to try to take advantage of what's going on. Did that work for some people? I don't know. Some of the larger players in the game, they shut down their marketing. Probably smart. Well, I wouldn't say shut down. I mean, I wouldn't say smart about shutting down, but they did. They shut down, right? So it exposed me. I was spending a lot at that time, right? So it really it changed my business in the ability to spend for marketing.
Yeah.
And then that just caught up month after month, right? So, I mentioned that the friend had left, so that was kind of a positive thing, him leaving. But I've been basically just sustaining my business the last 2 years, not really working hard, right? But it's just kind of self-sustaining.
Yeah.
And it's really self-sustaining because of the SEO and some of the work that we've put into my site over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Knock on wood, I've been able to decrease my marketing 50, 60, 70% and still get leads coming in.
Yeah.
And they're good quality because they're organic. So, that's what it's changed my business.
Yeah.
And then you asked moving forward, well, there goes me partnering with somebody who is doing things completely different than me, who's got a team and systems and processes in place that I've always wanted, so now I'm kind of, I think that, and I've seen other groups all over the country do that as well. But, I think people are just partnering and getting stronger together as opposed to trying to do it alone. And, I'm sure I could build it all up myself, but I think for me personally, like I said, working with somebody else who has the same kind of goals and aspirations is how I plan on getting out of it. Shifting focus to commercial as well.
Yeah.
More of those opportunities that are out there. So I don't know. I hope, does that kind of answer all of that?
Yeah. It does. And I think your whole point about, first of all, I absolutely love and 100% going to steal from you the phrase, like what COVID did is expose you, because it works. There's a pun because you get exposed to COVID and then you get exposed to your business. And I'm a sucker for a pun, being a father. So, I'll take that stuff all day. But I love that idea because there is very much a sense that I have now, and like as a business owner, right, and working with other businesses, very much got the sense, very similarly to you, that there's going to be people who don't make it through this because good times make things relatively easy, right? And then similarly, while I'm having that thought and I'm feeling very confident, sure of myself, right, I turn around and I'm like, oh, and by the way, these things in my business are on fire, right? These things are on fire. And it made me realize, right, the places where we had gotten complacent or we had gotten, just kind of like too sure of ourselves, right? And there's this great, this thing I love to read about, which we don't have to get into in any way, but there's this thing called Cynefin, which is like a complexity framework. This guy, Dave Snowden, worked for, I think, IBM in the 80s and 90s and sort of developed this like kind of complexity framework. And he says, systems are either clear, complicated, complex, or chaotic, right? And we don't have to get into the thing, but like a clear system is a system that like everybody feels like they understand, right? Yeah, I put my key in the car and I turn it and the ignition, turns over and the car starts going. Like that's a clear system, right? I put the thing in, you do the same thing every time. How do you want to start the car? You turn the key, right? You're not like, how do I start the car today, right?
Right.
And one of Snowden's points that I always thought was so profound is there's a reason in his little framework that clear and chaotic are next to each other. Because it's like when everyone feels like they understand what goes on, like everyone gets it, there's only a tiny little change that needs to happen before everything explodes. So he's like, you're in the car, you turn the key and then the wheel falls off and now you're in chaos mode, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that's what it felt like. It was like the whole world kind of shifted into chaos mode for a while. And we're kind of still there. I don't know. That's kind of how it feels. So I just think it's a very different skill set navigating a market that's well known and hey, the best practices are XYZ. That's a different skill set from how do we navigate a world where things are kind of uncertain. We don't really know what's going to happen. And I've got to cap my downside and all these things. Let's talk SEO a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you have long had, and I'll typically call you out. I think I mentioned this on the last podcast that you did with me, but I think you have some of the best SEO in real estate investing. And I think you've done a really good job of that historically. I'm curious if and we don't have to get too technically into the weeds of that stuff or whatever, but I'm curious if you noticed an up and down or an ebb and flow in that. And where do you kind of view SEO as being in your kind of current marketing strategy? Because you're building on, because it sounds like SMS and cold calling and stuff. Are you moving away from SEO? Are you going to start building that again? Like, how do you view that right now?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I've taken my foot off the gas just for a minute, but that's only because of what's been going on. And then also the slow integration with another company. But
yeah,
right. Well, that's pretty much one of our main marketing channels that we'll be doing. So, I came from the corporate world, right? And so being in the corporate world, besides doing all the cold calling and all the other stuff, one of the things I used to love is getting leads in the morning. You just wake up and there's leads, right? Whether it's from a trade show or whatever it is. And those have always been the best leads, the most quality leads. And so I wanted to run my business that way as opposed to outreaching. So most people are outreaching to people, sending mail, cold calling, SMS, all that stuff. I basically spent the last 5 years doing the complete opposite, trying to create methods for people to reach out to me.
Right.
And so SEO, it just takes time. And I came from, I ran an online business before I got into real estate. And so I was very familiar with social media marketing, guerrilla marketing strategies, and the importance of keywords and that type of stuff. And I knew that building a business, that is going to be the most important thing.
Right.
Building a brand, credibility. And so that has always been my mindset from day one. So I basically focused on that from almost like the beginning, and knowing that was going to take time. And so fast forward to now, I've dramatically decreased, like my PPC budget, but I'm still getting about the same amount of organic SEO leads.
Yeah.
So that really hasn't fluctuated in the good or bad times. It's just been consistent. And we know that those leads are just higher quality. One of the things that you said to me a long time ago is actually stuck with me was you're like, Dave, what do you want to focus on? Quality or quantity?
Yeah.
Because I think we were trying out some like Facebook stuff. And I said, man, I'm getting a ton of leads, but they just suck.
Yeah.
And you were like, well,
terrible, but such big portions. That's the vibe. Yeah.
The portions are great, but it's just, I can't eat it. So, so that always stuck with me. Right. So I would rather not waste my time with the bad stuff and just get to the good stuff. And it just costs a lot. So, it's just a different way. Once again, it's just a mindset shift. Most investors need deals now. They want leads now. And so it's hard for a lot of people to invest. But if I could tell them, if you do it in the beginning, it'll double, triple itself in the long run. And in some markets, it doesn't take long. Keep in mind, for anyone that's listening, I'm in Philadelphia. Philadelphia for the last few years has been one of the toughest markets. I'm not only competing with other wholesalers and investors, but also large funds that are out there and large iBuyers. So, most of the people on page one are people that are buying the leads to sell to investors, like those lead companies. They're not even other wholesalers. They're just capturing the lead to resell. So, that it's tough. But the longer you're at it, the more fruitful it becomes. And if one thing I will add is that the spreads have been a lot larger with those deals as well.
Yeah. So you're talking the spread is bigger with your SEO leads than with other lead types, or just in general, your deal spreads have gotten bigger?
Well, the deal spreads have gotten bigger, but in general, the organic SEO leads specifically.
Yeah.
So it's not, so you don't need a whole, depending on how you run your business, small team, large team, whatever, you don't need a whole bunch of them to make your profit. So
I want to point this out because I think this is so cool. You mentioned this all the way back. You were talking about, understanding what you didn't want your business to be represented as or stand for, right? So you're like, look, I didn't do bandit signs because it didn't match in your head your vision for the company, right? And similarly, you were like, yeah, I could do Facebook leads. There's nothing wrong with Facebook ads or Facebook leads. They're great. People use them, right? They're awesome. But it does tend to be, I would say it's penny candy, right? Where it's like, yeah, it's super cheap. You can get a lot of it, but they're Necco waivers. So you just have a lot of Necco waivers. And like that, maybe that's your thing, maybe not. But, but you kind of understood this sort of underlying concept that I always think about, which is there's an opportunity cost to everything. And if you are chasing down 1,000,001 low quality leads, right, your chances of having a really high quality lead fall through the cracks are relatively high, right? It makes me think of, we had Andrew Newland on here from Ozark House Buyers a couple episodes ago. He was talking about they're doing they opened up a new marketing channel and they're getting blasted with leads, right? And they're like, this is amazing. But they noticed their revenue didn't really go up because what was happening was they were spending all their time fielding lower quality stuff. And for him, it was like PPC, they do SEO as well, but it's like those leads were higher quality for them and they were losing them, right? Losing them in the haystack. So it's just as important, right? And I love that you kind of you sort of hit on this where it's it's just as important to know what you don't want to do as it is to know what you want to do.
Yeah.
I just think that's awesome. We're going a little bit late, so I want to make sure that I wrap up. There's so much stuff I wanted to get into. You're going into commercial wholesalers, so you're doing storage facilities. There's just so much stuff going on. So if people want to follow up with you or learn a little bit more about you, PhillyHomeInvestor.com obviously is the place to go. If you want to check out, what Dave is doing on the SEO front, you should absolutely go check out that site. It's a fantastic investor site. I think they do a really amazing job there. But is there anywhere else you want people to follow up with you and kind of learn a little bit more about you or reach out or anything like that?
Yeah, man, absolutely. Sure. I have a personal website as well. It's just my last name, Bokman Investment Group. It has all of the companies that I own and operate. So if you're a buyer in the Philadelphia area, you can join my buyers list there. It also has some of my podcasts that I've been on, and also a way to reach out to me as well.
Cool. Yeah. So that's BokmanInvestmentGroup.com. Bokman is Bokman.
You got it.
Check that out. I will have both those links in the show notes. You can go to AdWordsNerds.com/podcast to get those. My friend, thank you so much for coming on. This was really, really fascinating. I'm so glad we got a chance to catch up, man. This is great.
Cool, man. Thank you for having me again. I'm always happy to share whatever wisdom I can drop on people.
Well, you've got it. So I'm glad that you're dropping it. And again, I'm completely stealing the exposed to COVID thing, COVID exposure. I'm 100% taking that. So no take backs. That's how it goes.
I'm handing it off to you.
All right. Cheers. Thanks, man.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.